It was the kind of cold that crept into your bones and stayed there, no matter how tightly you wrapped your arms around yourself. I sat on the crumbling stone steps outside the shuttered bakery, my knees drawn to my chest, my chin resting on the edge of my frayed sleeve. People passed by in a blur of scarves and polished shoes. Not a single glance spared in my direction except for the occasional quick look that seemed more like they were checking to make sure I wasn't about to ask them for something. My name is Daniel, though nobody in this part of town ever bothered to ask. To them, I was just another face among the hundreds of forgotten ones who drifted through the streets with no destination. I was 26 years old, though most days I felt decades older, and I'd learned a long time ago that the city didn't have much patience for the likes of me. I'd once had an apartment, a job, even a circle of friends, but those things have a way of disappearing quickly when life decides to take a turn you never saw coming. Now I carried my world in a battered canvas bag that barely held together, stuffed with a blanket, a dented tin mug, and a few pieces of clothing I'd scavenged from donation bins. I didn't talk to many people, but there was one person who still seemed to care, or at least pretend to. Emma. She was a volunteer at the shelter a few streets over, where they served soup and bread in the evenings. Emma was in her early 30s, with dark hair that curled loosely around her face and eyes that carried a softness you didn't see often in this part of town. She had a way of making you feel like she was listening, really listening, and not just waiting for her turn to speak. I'd known her for almost 2 years now, and though I never dared to hope for more than friendship, I couldn't help but notice the way my chest felt lighter when she smiled at me. That night, she found me shivering on the bakery steps and crouched down so we were eye to eye. "Daniel, you can't keep sitting out here like this," she said gently. "There's an empty cot at the shelter. At least come inside for a while." I wanted to tell her I was fine, that I'd grown used to the cold, but the truth was my fingers were numb and my stomach had been empty since morning. I followed her, my bag slung over my shoulder, and she walked just slow enough for me to keep up. The shelter was warm, the air thick with the smell of vegetable stew, and for a moment I felt like I'd stepped into another world. But warmth and food weren't enough to erase the feeling that had been growing inside me for months now, something I couldn't quite put into words. A longing, maybe, but not just for a better life. For something else, something I didn't yet dare to name. That night, I lay on the cot staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet breathing of the others in the room. In the faint glow of the emergency light, my thoughts drifted to a memory I'd tried to bury years ago. A charity shop window, a mannequin dressed in a gown the color of dusk, the kind of dress that looked like it could change a person's fate just by touching their skin. I'd stood outside that window for nearly half an hour, my heart racing, wondering what it would feel like to wear something so beautiful. Back then I told myself it was just curiosity. Now I wasn't so sure. Days turned into weeks, and though Emma and I spoke often, I never told her about the restlessness building inside me. It wasn't just about clothes. It was about wanting to feel like I belonged somewhere, like I could be someone people looked at with admiration instead of pity. One rainy afternoon, while the shelter was nearly empty, I found myself alone in the small storage room where they kept donations. I was looking for a sweater when I saw it, a box labeled "Special Occasion." Inside were dresses, skirts, and blouses, most of them too small or too worn for anyone else to want. My fingers brushed over a pale lavender dress with delicate embroidery along the hem. It wasn't fancy in the way that gown in the shop window had been, but something about it made my breath catch. I held it up against myself, the fabric cool under my hands, and for a moment I forgot the damp chill of the shelter. I didn't hear Emma come in until she spoke softly behind me. "That color looks good on you," she said. I froze, my face flushing hot even though the room was cold. I wasn't sure whether to laugh it off or put the dress back quickly, but she stepped closer instead of away. "You've got a kind of grace, Daniel. Most people don't notice it, but I do." Her words hung in the air between us, and I didn't know how to respond. She didn't press me, just smiled and helped me fold the dress neatly before placing it back in the box. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Grace. It wasn't a word I'd ever thought applied to me, but now I wondered. One evening, when the shelter was quiet, Emma asked if I'd help her set up for a charity dinner. It was being held in the old community hall, a place I'd never been inside. She mentioned casually that the theme was a night of elegance and that the volunteers would be dressed up. I laughed and told her I didn't own anything elegant, but she just gave me a knowing look.
"Don't worry about that," she said.
"I've got something in mind." The night of the dinner, she handed me a garment bag and told me to get ready in the small office at the back of the hall. When I unzipped it, my heart stopped. Inside was the lavender dress from the storage room, freshly cleaned and pressed. There was also a pair of simple flats, a shawl, and a little box with a silver hair clip shaped like a leaf. I stared at the dress for a long time, my hands trembling, torn between the urge to put it on and the fear of what it might mean if I did. In the end, I slipped into it, the fabric falling softly around me, the embroidery brushing my knees when I moved. I caught sight of myself in the dusty mirror propped against the wall, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the man who slept on bakery steps. I saw someone else entirely. Someone I might have been if life had taken a different path. Emma knocked lightly on the door and asked if I was ready. My voice caught when I answered yes. When I stepped out, she smiled in a way that made my chest ache, like she was seeing me for the first time. "You look perfect," she said simply. And for a moment, I almost believed her. The moment I stepped out of that small office in the lavender dress, it felt like the air around me shifted. Not just for me, but for everyone who turned their heads as I walked past. I'd expected awkward glances or maybe even a few laughs, but instead there were smiles, curious eyes, and a murmur of conversation I couldn't quite make out. Emma led me to the table where the other volunteers were arranging plates and glasses, introducing me simply as Daniel, though the way people looked at me now was different, as if the name no longer fully fit. The hall was lit with strings of warm bulbs, casting a soft glow over the polished wooden floor and the faded gold curtains. The scent of roasted vegetables and fresh bread drifted in from the kitchen, mingling with the faint perfume of flowers arranged in tall vases at each table. Emma handed me a stack of folded napkins and whispered that I could help set them out. As I moved from table to table, the dress swayed lightly around my legs, and each step seemed to draw me further into a world I didn't know I'd been missing. But beneath the quiet thrill of it all, there was a knot of tension in my stomach. I couldn't stop wondering if I looked ridiculous, or if someone from the shelter might recognize me and start asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. The dinner began slowly, with guests trickling in from the rain-soaked streets outside. They were a mix of community members, donors, and people from the shelter who'd been invited to enjoy the evening as guests. I tried to stay busy refilling water pitchers and clearing plates, but every now and then I'd catch someone's eyes lingering on me. One older woman, dressed in a deep green gown, stopped me as I passed her table. "You have such poise," she said warmly. "I hope you know that." I thanked her quietly, unsure how to take the compliment. Emma floated between tables with an ease I envied, always smiling, always making people feel welcome. A few times our eyes met across the room, and she gave me a small nod, like she was telling me I was doing fine. Midway through the evening, there was a brief lull while the main course was served. I stepped into the hallway to catch my breath, leaning against the cool plaster wall. My reflection in the narrow mirror by the coat rack caught my eye. The shawl had slipped slightly, revealing the curve of my shoulder, and I reached up to adjust it. The person staring back at me felt familiar and unfamiliar all at once. That was when I heard the voices. Two men were standing just around the corner, speaking in low tones. One of them chuckled and said, "You see the new volunteer? The one in the dress?" The other replied, "Yeah, I heard she's from the shelter. Surprised they let someone like that be part of the dinner." My heart pounded. Someone like that. I stayed still, hoping they'd walk away, and after a moment they did. But their words stayed with me, heavier than I wanted to admit. Back inside, Emma must have noticed my mood because she brushed past me and murmured, "Ignore them. They don't know you like I do." The evening ended with polite applause for the organizers and a few speeches from the guests of honor. I stood to the side, watching Emma accept thanks and praise with a humble smile. When it was time to clean up, she asked me to help carry a box of tablecloths back to the storage room. Once the door was closed behind us, she turned to me. I know tonight might have been overwhelming, she said. But I want you to know, you are incredible out there. You belong in spaces like this, Daniel. I almost told her then about the way I'd felt wearing the dress, about the strange mix of fear and comfort it brought me. But the words stuck in my throat. Over the next few weeks, Emma found more reasons for me to help with events. Sometimes it was at the hall, sometimes at the shelter. And always there was a dress or a skirt waiting for me in a garment bag, each one different, each one fitting just a little better than the last. I started learning small things: how to walk without tripping over the hem, how to pin my hair so it stayed in place, how to hold my head in a way that made my neck look longer. These were details Emma never pointed out directly, but I caught her watching me sometimes with a thoughtful look in her eyes. One afternoon, while sorting donations, I found a box of makeup. Most of it was old or mismatched, but there were a few things still sealed. I hesitated before picking up a small compact of pressed powder. It felt fragile in my hands, like it held more weight than its size should allow. I tried it later in the shelter's bathroom, just a light dusting across my cheeks, but even that small change startled me. My reflection seemed softer somehow, the shadows under my eyes less harsh. That night, I caught Emma glancing at me more than once, though she didn't say anything. The transformation, if I could even call it that, was gradual. But with each small step, the line between the Daniel who slept on bakery steps and the person I saw in the mirror began to blur. And yet, with every new dress, every new gesture I learned, the fear of being found out grew sharper. It wasn't just about the people from the shelter or the strangers in the street. It was about the possibility that Emma might one day look at me and see not grace, but deceit. The suspense began to weave itself into my days. Once, while helping set up for an event, I heard the heavy click of the hall's back door opening unexpectedly. My heart raced, convinced someone had come in early and would catch me halfway through applying lipstick. It was only a delivery driver, but the adrenaline left me shaky for hours. Another time, I was walking back to the shelter in a borrowed coat over a deep blue gown when I caught sight of a man staring at me from across the street. He didn't say anything, but his eyes followed me until I turned the corner.
I didn't tell Emma about that.
The turning point came on a night when Emma asked if I'd join her for a private gathering at a small cafe after hours. It was for a group of people she called her circle friends, colleagues, and a few others from the community. She said they'd love to meet me, and that I should wear the gold dress she'd found earlier that week. I agreed, though my nerves twisted in knots the whole day. The cafe was lit with candles and soft music, the scent of coffee and pastries filling the air. The people there were warm and curious, asking me gentle questions about myself. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Too seen, maybe, because halfway through the evening I noticed someone new had joined the group. A man I recognized from the streets, someone who'd seen me at my lowest. He was watching me with a puzzled expression, like he was trying to place my face. My pulse quickened. If he spoke, if he told them who I really was, everything could unravel. I excused myself to the bathroom, leaning against the sink to steady my breathing. The face in the mirror looked calm enough, but my hands trembled. Outside the door, I heard footsteps approaching. A knock came, soft but insistent. "Daniel, it's Emma. Are you all right?" I opened the door slowly, and her eyes searched mine. She didn't ask for an explanation. She just said, "Come on, they're waiting for us." But I could feel the question lingering between us, unspoken. And I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would have to come out. When we stepped back into the glow of the cafe, I could feel his eyes still on me. The man from the streets sat near the far wall, his cup untouched, his brow furrowed as though he was trying to solve a puzzle that refused to give him peace. I tried to focus on the warmth of the conversation around me, the soft clink of cups and the gentle hum of laughter, but my mind kept circling back to him. Emma moved easily among her friends, touching a shoulder here, leaning in to listen there, and each time her gaze swept the room it landed on me just long enough to remind me I wasn't alone. But that didn't make the knot in my chest loosen. At one point, I turned my head and found the man standing only a few feet away, his voice low but clear enough to reach me. "You look different, Daniel. Took me a minute to recognize you." My heart lurched at the sound of my name on his lips. I forced a smile, hoping it would be enough to close the gap between the life I'd been living and the one I was trying to step into. "Guess I clean up all right," I said, keeping my voice even. He studied me for another moment, then shrugged and walked away. But the seed of unease he'd planted refused to fade. Later that night, when the gathering ended and the candles burned low, Emma and I walked together through the quiet streets. She didn't speak at first, and the silence stretched long enough that I thought maybe she wouldn't. But then she asked, softly, "Who was that man?" "Just someone from before," I replied quickly, but she didn't look convinced. She stopped walking, her hand lightly touching my arm. "Daniel, I've never pushed you to tell me more about your past, but if there's something I should know, now might be the time." The street lamp cast a halo of light around her, making her look like she belonged to another world entirely. I wanted to tell her everything about the nights on the steps, the hunger, the cold, the way the lavender dress had unlocked something in me I couldn't explain. But the words felt tangled, caught between fear and longing. "Let's just get back," I said instead, and we walked the rest of the way in silence. In the days that followed, the tension between us grew, though it was unspoken. Emma still invited me to events, still found reasons for me to dress up, but there was a new weight in her gaze, like she was waiting for me to hand her a missing piece of a puzzle. The breaking point came during the spring charity gala, the largest event of the year. The community hall was transformed with chandeliers and white-draped tables, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Emma had chosen a pale gold gown for me this time, with a fitted bodice and a skirt that moved like water when I walked. As I stood near the entrance greeting guests, I saw him again, the man from the cafe. He wasn't dressed for the gala, just in a worn jacket and jeans, and he stood outside the tall glass doors looking in. My pulse spiked. He caught my eye and motioned for me to come outside. I hesitated, glancing around to see if Emma had noticed, but she was across the room speaking to a group of donors. I slipped out the side door into the cool night air. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. He took a step closer, his expression unreadable. "I just think it's interesting seeing you like this. Never would have guessed it back when you were sleeping under the bridge." My stomach tightened. "What are you going to do?" He smiled faintly, not kindly. "That depends. People might like to know who their princess really is." The word landed like a stone in my chest. Princess. It was meant to be a jab, but it echoed with a strange truth I wasn't ready to face. Before I could respond, Emma's voice called my name from the doorway. I turned to see her standing there, her eyes moving between us. "Daniel, is everything all right?" The man gave me one last look and walked away into the shadows. I forced a smile and told her it was fine, but she didn't look convinced. Inside, the gala continued as though nothing had happened, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Every laugh, every polite conversation felt like a thread stretched too tight, ready to snap. When it was over and the last of the guests had left, Emma asked me to help gather the centerpieces. We worked in silence for a while before she set down the vase in her hands and turned to me. "I need to know, Daniel, not just about him, about you. Why you're here. Why you keep putting on these clothes like they're armor." Her voice wasn't harsh, but it cut through me all the same. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years pressing on me. I told her about the bakery steps, the nights I'd gone to sleep hungry, the way people looked at me like I was invisible. I told her about the lavender dress, about how it had felt like a key to a locked door inside me. And I told her about the fear that if she knew everything, she'd stop looking at me the way she did. She listened without interrupting, her eyes steady on mine. When I finished, she stepped closer and took my hands. "Daniel, I don't care where you came from. I care about who you are when you're standing right here in front of me. But you need to decide if you're going to keep hiding." Her words lingered in my mind long after we'd finished cleaning and gone our separate ways. That night, lying on my cot at the shelter, I thought about the man from the cafe, about the way the gold gown had felt against my skin, about the strange strength that came from stepping into a role I was never meant to play. And for the first time, I wondered if I could turn that role into something real. Days later, Emma invited me to a smaller gathering at the hall, just a few people she trusted. When I arrived, she handed me a box. Inside was a gown unlike any I'd worn before, deep crimson, with delicate beadwork that caught the light. As I changed into it, my hands shook, not from fear this time, but from something like anticipation. When I stepped out, the room went quiet. Emma smiled, but there was something else in her eyes, too, a kind of pride I didn't fully understand.
You look like you were born for this, she said.
But before I could answer, the doors at the far end of the hall swung open. Standing there was the man from the streets, and beside him were two others I recognized from my past. They looked around the room, their eyes locking on me. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Emma took a step toward them, but I raised my hand to stop her. The room seemed to shrink, every heartbeat loud in my ears. And then one of them spoke. We just thought everyone should know who she really is. I kept walking, though my feet felt like they were made of stone, dragging across the cracked pavement. Every step seemed to echo in the hollow corridors of my mind. The streets here were quieter than the market road. The occasional dog barked in the distance, and a couple of kids chased each other through the dust, but otherwise, it was just me and the sound of my own breathing. Hunger had become something I didn't think about anymore. It was just there, like air, always present, never satisfied. My stomach gave a dull ache that barely registered now. I glanced up at the peeling posters on the brick wall I passed. They were for events I could never attend: grand dances, concerts, charity galas with ticket prices that could feed me for months. On one, there was a picture of a woman in a shimmering gown, smiling as though the whole world belonged to her. I didn't know her name, but something in her eyes, confident yet soft, made me stop. I touched the corner of the paper, feeling the texture of ink beneath my fingertips, and wondered what it would be like to be someone like her, even for just a day. The sound of an engine brought me back to reality. I turned my head to see a black car gliding down the road, its paint so glossy it mirrored the dim streetlights. It slowed as it approached, the tinted window rolling down halfway. I saw a pair of eyes, sharp and assessing, framed by a face that looked like it belonged on those posters. A woman, maybe in her late 30s, with sleek hair pulled back and a string of pearls resting against her neck. "You," she said, her voice smooth yet carrying an edge that made me straighten. "What's your name?" I hesitated. It had been so long since anyone had asked. "Erin," I managed, my voice hoarse. Her gaze flicked down, taking in my tattered clothes, the dirt on my hands, then back to my face. "Come with me," she said simply. I blinked.
Why?
She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened the car door herself and stepped out, her heels clicking on the ground. The scent of something expensive perfume with notes I couldn't name reached me. "Because," she said, almost smiling but not quite, "you look exactly like someone I used to know." Something about her tone sent a chill up my spine. It wasn't a compliment, it felt like the start of something I couldn't yet see the shape of. I wanted to say no, to walk away, but the way she held my gaze made it feel impossible. "Get in the car, Erin," she said again more firmly. I don't know why I obeyed. Maybe it was the thought of warmth, or maybe it was the way she seemed to already have decided my fate for me. As I slid into the leather seat, the door closed with a solid thud, shutting out the night air. The car began to move, and with each turn, I felt like I was being carried further away from the life I'd known and deeper into something I couldn't yet name. We drove in silence for several minutes, the city lights fading as we entered a more secluded area. My fingers curled into my lap, and I caught my reflection in the dark glass of the window. For a second, I thought I saw another face over mine, softer, unfamiliar, but with the same eyes. I blinked, and it was gone. "You're wondering why I stopped for you," she said suddenly, as if she could read my thoughts. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "You'll find out soon," she replied. And the way she said it, calm, certain, made me realize that whatever this was, there was no turning back now. The rain had slowed to a thin drizzle, the kind that clung to your eyelashes and made the air feel heavy with secrets. I was still sitting on the edge of the market square, clutching the half-loaf of bread like it was my only shield against the world. I'd been watching the people pass, boots polished, collars straight, umbrellas held like banners of some unspoken pride. None of them spared me a glance. That was normal. I was part of the background, the blur of the city that didn't matter. But then, one set of footsteps slowed. At first, I thought it was just someone waiting for the rain to let up, but when I looked up, my breath caught. She stood in a cloak so pale it seemed to hold its own light, even in the gray. Her face was hidden under the hood, but I could see her lips curve in the faintest, most unsettling smile. She didn't move like someone afraid of getting wet. She moved like the rain was beneath her notice. I wanted to look away, but something in me couldn't. She knelt, her cloak pooling around her like a sheet of moonlight, and placed something in my hand. It wasn't a coin. It wasn't bread. It was a ribbon. Blue silk, smooth as water, tied in a neat bow. "Keep it," she said, her voice low, almost conspiratorial. "When the time comes, wear it, and someone will find you." I stared at her, confused, but before I could speak, she stood and disappeared into the street, swallowed by the drifting crowd. My fingers tightened around the ribbon. It was absurd. Why would I keep it? Why would I believe her? But I slipped it into my pocket anyway, as if afraid the rain might wash it away. That night, under the leaking roof of the alley, I turned the ribbon over and over in my hands, tracing the weave of the silk. It was clean, perfect, completely out of place in my world of mud and scraps. I told myself it meant nothing, but I didn't throw it away. Days passed. The ribbon stayed with me. And then, on the 6th day, the world shifted.